Deep in the Australian outback, near the remote town of Alice Springs, the ancient red landscape is interrupted by something completely alien. Dozens of glowing, stark white domes sit nestled among the rugged McDonald Ranges. To the local Orente people, this exact stretch of desert is ancestral land, steeped in thousands of years of sacred history. Yet it now hosts one of the most heavily guarded, secretive facilities on Earth. Today, the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap operates around the clock. Over 800 personnel work in total isolation, controlling a vast network of surveillance satellites that monitor a full third of the globe. Building an intelligence network with that kind of boundless reach required a very specific foundation. The intelligence agencies needed the most isolated, disconnected blank space on the map they could possibly find. The reason goes back to the 1960s, during the height of the Cold War. The CIA was relying heavily on U-2 spy planes to monitor Soviet nuclear activity, but those planes were being shot down, leaving American intelligence with a massive, dangerous blind spot. The solution they devised was orbital satellites. Early spy satellites monitored missile tests from space, but beamed data back in a wide, unencrypted signal. If it hit the ocean, Soviet ships could intercept. The CIA needed a massive landmass to contain the signal. Central Australia was the perfect shield. The United States and Australia signed a secret treaty in 1966 to build the base. To keep the Soviet Union and the public in the dark, they released a convenient cover story. The governments announced the construction of a harmless joint space research and weather station. From its very first day of operation, Pine Gap was a strictly defensive measure, built to keep American pilots out of hostile skies, protected by a very deliberate political lie. When the Cold War ended, the facility didn't close. Instead, it rapidly expanded into a sprawling complex housing up to 45 giant dishes and radomes. This animation shows Pine Gap's advanced Orion satellites parked 36,000 kilometers above Earth. These massive orbital vacuum cleaners sweep up signals, beaming them down to specialized ground systems like the Taurus multi-beam antenna, which intercepts 35 communication satellites simultaneously. With these immense hardware upgrades, the facility abandoned its original narrow focus on tracking Soviet missiles. It began vacuuming up the raw communications data of the entire modern world. The sheer scale of that surveillance net remained hidden until 2013, when leaked documents from whistleblower Edward Snowden exposed Pine Gap as a central, load-bearing pillar in the Five Eyes intelligence network. This is X-Keyscore, the algorithmic engine powering the NSA's collect-it-all doctrine. It indiscriminately captures and sorts massive volumes of data, pulling in civilian phone calls, internet traffic, and military radar without distinction. Pine Gap had achieved a kind of total omniscience. It held a real-time mirror up to the globe's communications, operating as the ultimate passive eavesdropper. When an intelligence agency possesses real-time data on every target everywhere, you have to ask, how long until they stop listening and start acting? The streams of intercepted data flowing into the outback are now actively weaponized. Analysts at Pine Gap use those signals to provide the real-time geolocation of targets in active conflicts across the Middle East and Afghanistan. That highly precise, updated geolocation data directly feeds the coordinate systems for United States drone strikes, allowing military operators to execute lethal force from thousands of miles away. A desert base constructed in 1966 strictly to keep American pilots safe from being shot down has slowly evolved into the exact mechanism pulling the trigger to eliminate targets on the other side of the planet. The passive watcher in the desert has become the hunter.
Deep in the Australian outback, the red dirt stretches for thousands of miles. It is one of the most isolated, desolate landscapes on Earth. But in modern warfare, the crosshairs of a drone strike over Yemen or Somalia no longer begin in Washington. They begin with a data pulse here in Central Australia. This is Pine Gap. The Australian government officially classifies these massive white radomes as a benign joint defense facility. During the Cold War, the base acted as a passive listener, monitoring global superpowers. Following the declaration of the War on Terror, the facility's role changed, moving from passive listening to active operational support. If we trace the actual data running through these servers today, the operations inside the fence look very different from the official public narrative. The facility intercepts signals from satellite phones and mobile devices across the planet. As those signals enter the facility, they are processed to calculate the exact real-time geolocation of targeted individuals. This intelligence is fed directly into the U.S. military's targeting system, guiding lethal drone strikes, like those carried out by the MQ-9 Reaper, across Pakistan, Somalia, and Afghanistan. Today, 2 massive advanced Orion satellites controlled from the facility sit parked in orbit over the Indian Ocean. These satellites sweep up electronic communications and intelligence streaming out of the Gaza Strip in real time. That intercepted data is passed directly to the Israel Defense Forces, supplying crucial targeting information for their ongoing bombardment. By calculating the coordinates and handing over the intelligence, this remote base plays a role in the direct execution of offensive strikes in foreign conflicts. There are nearly 800 personnel operating the facility's systems day and night. Of those 800 people, only around 10% are actually employed by the Australian government. The rest are a network of U.S. military operatives, American intelligence agents, and highly paid private defense contractors. These include personnel from U.S. aerospace and defense giants like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. Pine Gap functions as a corporatized American garrison, raising questions about whether Australia maintains any real control over the site. Hosting this level of foreign intelligence infrastructure carries a severe strategic cost. Defense experts and officials agree on what would happen in the event of a major global conflict, such as a U.S.-China war over Taiwan. Because Pine Gap is essential to U.S. nuclear deterrence and warfighting, its presence makes Central Australia a priority target for a nuclear strike. A facility built under the banner of national defense effectively ensures that the hosting nation is one of the first locations hit in a global war. The reality of Pine Gap is physically separated from its nearest neighbors by only 5 kilometers of desert road. This is Whitegate, a town camp belonging to the Arrente people, the traditional owners of the land. Behind the high-security fences, billions of dollars are invested in hyper-modern, air-conditioned server rooms. Outside, the traditional owners live without paved roads or basic sewerage systems. Indigenous residents living just miles from the base are forced to rely on trucked-in water and live without secure housing. For the Arrente people, the base represents a layering of history. It is a foreign military garrison built on sacred land without consent.
A moment of reflection. Local resistance to the base has been constant, from the women's peace camps of the 1980s to the blockades occurring at the gates today. Protesters continue to demand sovereign justice, the return of their sacred land, and an end to the base's role in overseas military operations. So, what is Pine Gap? It is no longer just a research facility or a passive listener. It is an empire's trigger finger, buried in a nation that traded its sovereignty to spill real blood.